Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman.
Superman, perhaps the most famous superhero ever created, has been the face of comic books since his inception. As the first costumed hero ever created, the Man of Steel has gone along the journey with decades of writers to reflect the changing voices and ideas within the comic book world and beyond. Thus, Superman has become not only an American hero, but also a reflection of the American psyche, our culture, our souls, our stories. This is Superman, an American story.
Camping out on the street in front of the stock exchange, and in the tiny graveyard of Trinity Church on Broadway.
The worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, as it came to be described, the Great Depression lasted from 1929 to 1939 and was characterized by the decline in industrial output and record-breaking unemployment rates. But beyond the financial woes of the era, the American people were at a loss for hope. This is the backdrop upon which Superman entered the scene. He became a symbol of hope for the American people, the champion of the oppressed. This Superman was also quite isolationist, with no issues of him aiding foreign nations or even extraterrestrials. But this would all come to change as the US and Superman entered their next era.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
January 1942. Action Comics number 44 featured the first ever cover of Superman fighting Nazis. In fact, the Man of Tomorrow became a perfect example of the wartime propaganda that the government employed at the time. Superman comics persuaded readers to not let these soldiers die in vain, and to continue the support for the war effort in any way that they could. In this era, Superman became more aligned with the American cause in an attempt to support the war effort, and expand the patriotic rhetoric of the times. Superman evolved to fit the needs of not only what the government wanted, but also what the American people needed. Once more, he was a symbol of hope, but this marked the first time readers began to see glimpses of the patriotic symbol he would become.
And afterwards, now you've got the idea. Put plenty of Coke in that refrigerator. Ice-cold Coca-Cola will be a mighty welcome sight when you return.
As the United States came out of the war and transitioned to a life of normalcy and family values, so did Superman. In Action Comics number 149, Lois Lane finds a meteor containing films of Superman's parents' relationship, and, most importantly to this story, how Superman's mother got his father to marry her. Lois then uses these to try and court Clark into marrying her. These kinds of stories not only reflect the domestic shift in the American psyche, but also reinforce the domestic and political spheres that were being preached at the time. Important to note, however, these issues never touched on the counterculture movement that arose in the 60s in response to this picture-perfect domestic life. Thus, this represents a change for Superman, as he didn't adapt to reflect American society, instead just clinging to the conservative images of family values and propaganda to force the public to return to normalcy after the war.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This period of Superman stories reflected the conservative movement of the Reagan years. With stories like The Dark Knight Returns, which is a story that takes place in an alternate universe, Superman answers blindly to the authority of Ronald Reagan and the American government. In fact, Superman, who was once the symbol of hope and advocate for the little guy, struggled to find a place in this new world with this new form of conservatism on the rise. To do this, Superman had to change. He and his villains became more aggressive and militaristic. Also, there was a notable absence of his alien family or any mention of his alien origin, instead focusing on his adoptive family, reflecting the patriotism of the period and amplifying his status as an American icon.
The hammer and sickle is lowered for the last time, and an era comes to an end.
As the Soviet Union fell in 1991, the US could finally leave the decades-long Cold War behind them. In many ways, the American people did not really know where to go from there. This was reflected in perhaps the most famous Superman story of all time, the death of Superman. After Superman is killed at the hands of Doomsday, 4 new Supermen appear on the scene. Both readers and the comic book characters themselves struggled to determine which of these men would become the true Superman to carry on his legacy, just as America struggled to discover who they would be in this new world.
Despite all our divisions and disagreements, our hesitations and our fears, America prevailed because we chose to move forward as one nation.
As the American people moved into the modern era, so did too the Man of Steel. The idea of what it meant to be an American, the very basis upon which Superman was built, began to evolve. One of the most critically acclaimed Superman stories came out of this period. Grounded showed Superman, after the loss of New Krypton, walking across Middle America to focus on the troubles of everyday people. In this time, he deals with depression and the loss of his belief in the ideals of truth, justice, and the American way. The dilemma that Superman faces in the storyline reflects a wider discussion and debate that has been raised amongst comic book writers and readers alike in recent years, about whether or not Superman still has value in today's society. From a champion of the oppressed to the government's iron fist of justice to a man struggling to find his place in the world, the last son of Krypton has gone through more changes than one can count, much like the American people. Playing into the larger trends of pop culture mimicking society, Superman has grown to not only reflect the American people, but also serve as a symbol for them to strive to become. A man who could fly above the economic woes of the 1930s, a soldier who could zoom up to Hitler and punch him across Europe, a family man who could craft the perfect domestic life, a devout patriot upholding the fundamental values of the country, an inspiration to the people in a time of transition, and an American showing the power of vulnerability in today's society.
This amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel.
It's a bird, it's a plane. It's an American story.